The Saunders County District Court Order in Case 2024-CV-0418-Milburn, signed by Judge Hartley Vandermeer at 3:14 p.m. on a Saturday in late October at her chambers in Wahoo, Nebraska, was the document the Nebraska State Patrol Sergeant in dress greens handed to me on the front porch of the Whispering Creek Estates clubhouse at 3:48 p.m. that same afternoon, while 140 HOA members in golf clothes stood on the 18th green amenity lawn, watching a federal U.S. Marshal walk the HOA president, Lacey Hargrove Day, across the white pea gravel toward a waiting Nebraska AG vehicle in handcuffs. The order awarded constructive trust, effective immediately, over the entire amenity asset base of the Whispering Creek Estates Homeowners Association, the 18-hole golf course built in 2019, the 24-slip marina built in 2021, the equestrian center with 36 stalls built in 2022, the 4,000-foot grass airstrip built in 2023, the 12,000-square-foot stone and cedar clubhouse, and approximately $440,000 of additional improvements built between 2019 and 2024. To me, Prescott Milburn of Saunders County, Nebraska, as the defrauded landowner of record of the 2,200 acres of family farmland, whose forged deeds had funded the entirety of the HOA's amenity construction over the preceding 6 years. The total court-determined asset value, set in Judge Vandermeer's order at $12,420,000, was, by 3:48 p.m. on Saturday, October 26, 2024, in my name. I came back to my late older brother Hollis Milburn's 2,200-acre Saunders County farm in November of 2023, 6 months after my wife Adrienne died of stage 4 non-small cell lung cancer at our small house in Lincoln on a Tuesday evening in May of 2023, holding our son's hand. Hollis had died 2 months earlier, in September, at 87 years old, of complications related to a long decline from Lewy body dementia. He had been the third-generation operator of the Milburn Farm, 2,200 acres of Platte River bottomland, 3 miles west of the village of Cedar Bluffs in Saunders County, Nebraska, that my great-grandfather, Hollis Milburn I, had homesteaded in 1872 under a federal patent signed by President Ulysses S. Grant. The farm has been in continuous Milburn family ownership since. I am Prescott Milburn, 66 years old, born in Wahoo, Nebraska in March of 1958 to a Burlington Northern Railroad section foreman and a Saunders County rural school librarian. I spent 32 years at the office of the Nebraska State Auditor of Public Accounts, the last 21 as a senior forensic auditor in the Office of Performance Audit. My specialty was the financial review of homeowner associations, special improvement districts, and rural sanitary and improvement districts, the small quasi-governmental entities that own and operate the swimming pools, golf courses, water systems, and roads of the planned communities that have been built across eastern Nebraska in the last 40 years. I had personally led 147 HOA and special district forensic audits across my career. I had referred 41 of those audits to the Nebraska Attorney General for criminal prosecution. The 41 referrals had resulted in 38 criminal convictions, 3 plea bargain dismissals, and a state auditor's office reputation in the small world of eastern Nebraska HOA governance, of being the office no HOA board wanted to receive a phone call from. I retired in March of 2023, 2 months before Adrienne's diagnosis. We had been planning to spend our retirement on the porch of our Lincoln house, with 2 rocking chairs and a small garden. Adrienne never made it past the small garden. She died 71 days after the diagnosis. She was 63. We had been married for 39 years. I had carried the 2018 Hollis Milburn honey jar Esmeralda had given me back across that February afternoon in my truck console. I had set it on the kitchen counter at the ranch house when I got home. I had not opened it. I have not opened it. The jar sits, by my own decision, on the same kitchen shelf above Hollis's coffee pot, where it would have sat if my brother had not had the diagnosis and had brought it home in 2018 himself and had set it there. It is the last jar of honey my brother ever made. It is, in the language Adrienne would have used about a hospital room artifact, the chaplain's object, the thing that stays in the room because it tells the story the family is not yet ready to put away. Adrienne Milburn had been a hospital chaplain at Bryan Medical Center in Lincoln for 28 years. She had grown up in Hooper, Nebraska, the daughter of a Lutheran pastor and a farm bookkeeping clerk. She had been the only woman I have ever known who could de-escalate an angry hospital family in 3 sentences flat and then walk out of the room with her hand on the shoulder of every person in it. She had taught me, in the first year of our marriage in 1985, that forensic accounting was not so different from hospital chaplaincy, that both jobs required the same patient attention to a story other people had stopped listening to, and that the story almost always pointed at exactly the truth its tellers were trying to hide. She had been right about the work for 38 years. She would have been right about Whispering Creek Estates if she had lived to see it. Hollis had been my older brother since the day I was born in March of 1958. He had taught me to ride a horse in 1966, when I was 8 and he was 18. He had taught me to drive a tractor in 1971. He had taught me how to weld a fence brace in 1974, how to vaccinate a calf in 1976, and how to read a soil conservation aerial photograph in 1979, when I was a junior at Wahoo High School. He had been the older brother every younger brother in Saunders County had wanted. He had never married. He had stayed on the farm. He had taken over the operation from our father at 37, and he had run it, with the slow, patient competence our father had taught him, for 33 years until the diagnosis came in early 2018. He had told me about the diagnosis at our kitchen table at the Lincoln House on a Sunday afternoon in March of 2018, with Adrienne pouring coffee, in 3 sentences that I have not forgotten. He had said, "Prescott, the doctor at the Wahoo Clinic says it is Lewy body. The progression is 2 to 7 years. I would like to ask Plainsview Agronomy to take over the day-to-day. I would also like to ask you not to tell anyone outside the family." I had said, "Hollis, we will keep it quiet." We had kept it quiet for the rest of his life. The Whispering Creek Estates HOA treasurer, Cassius Hargrove's son Beauregard, who would later marry Lacey, had attended my brother's 78th birthday party at the ranch house in May of 2018, 6 weeks after the diagnosis, and had spoken with my brother for 40 minutes about Plainsview's transition to farm management. Beauregard had, by Reed's forensic trace, identified my brother's diagnosis from that conversation. He had begun the deed forgery operation 7 months later. Our older son Caleb is 38. He operates a 400-acre row crop farm in Pottawatomie County, Iowa, with his wife Aurelia and their 3 boys, who are 9, 6, and 4. Our younger son Reed is 33. He is a CPA at a Lincoln accounting firm. He is single. He drives up to the family farm most third weekends of the month with his Labrador retriever named Beaker and a thermos of coffee that he refills at the Casey's General Store on Highway 92 in North Bend. Hollis Milburn, my brother, had been 10 years older than me. He had taken over the farm in 1985 when our father died. He had operated it as a row crop and cattle operation until 2018, when he had begun, by his own self-aware reporting, to find the demands of the operation more than he could keep up with. He had hired a Cedar Bluffs farm management company called Plainsview Agronomy to run the day-to-day operation from 2018 onward, while Hollis maintained the deed in his own name and the ranch house residence on the eastern edge of the property. He had continued to live alone in the ranch house, with a part-time caregiver coming in 3 days a week beginning in 2020, until his fall in March of 2023 that had moved him into assisted living in Wahoo. He had died in his assisted living room on September 14th of 2023. I had visited Hollis approximately 1 weekend per month from 2018 through 2023. I had not, by my brother's quiet preference, and by my own honest assessment of his slow decline, been actively involved in the management of the farm itself during those 5 years. I had trusted Plainsview Agronomy. I had trusted the Saunders County tax records to be accurate. I had trusted the U.S. Department of Agriculture farm program paperwork to be in order. I had not, in 5 years, personally walked the western half of the property, the 1,500 acres of bottomland and pasture that lay between the Platte River and the eastern boundary of the Whispering Creek Estates planned community. The Whispering Creek Estates planned community had been built in stages between 2008 and 2013 by a developer named Cassius Hargrove of Omaha on a 400-acre tract that Hollis had sold him in 2007. The community had 116 luxury home sites, an HOA office, a small original clubhouse, a swimming pool, and a tennis court. Cassius Hargrove's daughter-in-law, a woman named Lacey Hargrove Day, had married Cassius's son, Beauregard Hargrove, in 2014, and had been elected to the Whispering Creek Estates HOA board in 2016. She had been elected president in 2018. She had been re-elected unanimously in 2020 and 2022. Lacey Hargrove Day was 54 years old. She was blonde down to her elbows. She drove a white Range Rover with the license plate WCE1. She had, by the official record of every Whispering Creek Estates HOA newsletter between 2018 and 2024, served as the visionary force behind what she called in her own campaign materials the elevation of Whispering Creek into one of the premier private residential and recreational communities of the greater Omaha region. The elevation had cost approximately $12,400,000 across 6 years of construction. The construction had been funded by the HOA's official quarterly financial reports filed with the Nebraska Secretary of State under the Small Association Reporting Rule, by voluntary capital improvement contributions from individual member households, and by amenity expansion donations from outside partner organizations the reports did not name. The outside partner organization, in every single one of the 11 separate financial reports that mentioned it across 6 years, was a Nebraska LLC called Whispering Creek Holdings, registered with the Nebraska Secretary of State in 2018, registered agent of record Beauregard Hargrove, Lacey's husband, sole member of record Lacey Hargrove Day. Whispering Creek Holdings LLC, between 2019 and 2024, had received approximately $14 million in revenue from 5 separate land transactions involving 2,200 acres of Saunders County agricultural land. Of that $14 million, approximately $12,400,000 had been transferred to the Whispering Creek Estates Homeowners Association as amenity expansion donations. The 2,200 acres of Saunders County agricultural land, Whispering Creek Holdings LLC, had sold between 2019 and 2024, was the Milburn family farm. The Milburn family farm had been deeded to my late brother, Hollis Milburn, in 1985 by our father's will, and had never, in any year of any decade, been deeded by Hollis Milburn to any person, entity, LLC, or corporation other than the original 2007 sale of 400 acres to Cassius Hargrove. The 5 separate deeds purporting to convey 2,200 acres from Hollis Milburn to Whispering Creek Holdings LLC, all recorded with the Saunders County Register of Deeds between January of 2019 and August of 2024, were forgeries. I discovered the first one on a Wednesday afternoon in February of 2024, 4 months after I moved back to the farm, when I drove out to the western property line to walk the boundary I had not walked since 2018, and found, instead of the cornfield I had remembered, a working wind farm of 14 2.5 megawatt General Electric turbines on a 500-acre tract that, according to the Saunders County GIS overlay I pulled on my phone from the truck, had been deeded by Hollis Milburn to Whispering Creek Holdings LLC on January 14th of 2019, and redeeded by Whispering Creek Holdings LLC to Next Era Energy Resources on March 22nd of 2019 for $3,500,000. I sat in the truck for 41 minutes without speaking. The turbines were turning in the steady west wind that crosses the Platte Bottomland in February. I had not, in my 32-year career at the state auditor's office, ever sat in a truck across from a 500-acre wind farm I had not known had been built on my family's land. The bottomland the turbines stood on was the bottomland Hollis had taught me to walk in 1972 when I was 14, and he had been showing me the cottonwood line that marked our western boundary. The cottonwoods were still there, behind the turbines, in the same row Hollis had walked me down 52 years earlier. The turbines were the new thing, the cottonwoods were the old. The wind crossing both was, in February of 2024, the same wind that had crossed the Platte bottomland on the morning my great-grandfather Asa had homesteaded the parcel in 1872. I drove home to the ranch house. I called my younger son Reed in Lincoln at 4:14 p.m. I told him what I had just seen. Reed was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, in the careful CPA voice he had been using on his clients at the Lincoln accounting firm for 9 years, "Dad, Uncle Hollis did not sell that land. Uncle Hollis was in early-stage Lewy body dementia by 2018. He would not have signed a deed in 2019. He did not have the testamentary capacity. Whatever you saw in those Register of Deeds records is a forgery." I said, "Reed, I think so too. I'm going to drive to the courthouse tomorrow morning. I'm going to pull every recorded deed against the Milburn parcel from 2018 forward." He said, "Dad, I am driving up tonight. I will be at the ranch by 10. He was at the ranch by 9:47 p.m. He brought a printed file from Hollis's bank records he had pulled from Hollis's Wahoo credit union account at lunchtime. Records he had been quietly reviewing since the will was probated in October of 2023, and that he had not yet had the opportunity to walk me through. Reed is the kind of CPA his mother had trained him to be from the dinner table at age 8, when Adrian would set the Lincoln household budget book in front of him on a Sunday evening and walk him through every line item with the patient, hospital chaplain voice she used on her cardiac floor. Reed had learned to read a ledger before he had learned to ride a bicycle. He had been pulling Hollis's bank records once a quarter since October of 2023 because, in his exact words on the back porch of the ranch house on the Sunday after the will was probated, "Dad, Uncle Hollis's farm income for 2022 and 2023 does not add up. Either Plainsview is not operating the farm the way they are billing it, or the proceeds are not coming back to Uncle Hollis. I would like to look at this for the next 90 days quietly before I say anything definitive." He had been looking for 121 days by February 21st of 2024. The record showed, across 2019 to 2024, no incoming wires from any party related to any land sale. Hollis had not received the $3.5 million from NextEra. Hollis had not received any of the other amounts. The money had gone, in every case, to Whispering Creek Holdings, LLC. We drove to the Saunders County Courthouse in Wahoo at 8:14 a.m. on Thursday, February 22nd, 2024. The Register of Deeds, a woman named Esmeralda Trotter, who had held the office since 2011 and who had known Hollis Milburn as a regular Friday afternoon visitor for all of those years, pulled the recorded deed file on the Milburn parcel in 12 minutes. The file contained 5 deeds executed between January of 2019 and August of 2024, all purportedly signed by Hollis Milburn, all conveying portions of the Milburn parcel to Whispering Creek Holdings, LLC, all notarized by a notary whose stamp I did not recognize. I asked Esmeralda to pull the notary's commission record from the Nebraska Secretary of State's database. She pulled it on her counter terminal in 2 minutes. The notary's commission had been issued to a woman named Brandeis McCorkadale of Omaha in 2017 and had been revoked by the Secretary of State in 2018 for repeated failure to renew bond. The 5 deeds had been notarized by a revoked notary between 2019 and 2024. Esmeralda Trotter was 61 years old. She had been the Saunders County Register of Deeds since 2011. She had been a Saunders County Clerk's Office employee since 1986. She had known Hollis as the Friday afternoon visitor who came in every other month to update his farm operating records, and who, every single Friday afternoon of his adult life, had brought her a small jar of honey from the bee yards he kept on the east end of the home pasture. Esmeralda had a small shelf behind her counter that held 41 jars of Hollis Milburn honey across 34 years. She had not, in any year, opened one of them. She had kept them as the record of her friendship with my brother. Esmeralda looked up at me over her reading glasses. She said, "Prescott, your brother Hollis was the kindest man who ever walked through this door. These deeds are not his." I said, "Esmeralda, I'd like 5 certified copies of each deed, the notary commission record, and the chain of title for every parcel these deeds purport to convey. I'd also like the original signature card your office holds from Hollis's 2007 sale to Cassius Hargrove, so I have an authenticated signature to compare against." She had it all to me by 11:14 a.m., every certified deed copy, the notary commission record, the original 2007 signature card, and a printed chain of title schedule that ran 9 pages and that I would later use as Exhibit B in Marisol Castañeda's complaint. The chain of title was clean from 1872 to 2007. Every Milburn transfer matched the family records I had in Hollis's parlor cabinet. The chain went cleanly through Cassius Hargrove's original 400-acre purchase in 2007. Then it stopped being clean in January of 2019. She walked the certified copies out from behind the counter herself. In a brown manila envelope she had hand-labeled in pencil with my brother's name and the dates of the deeds. She handed the envelope to me at the public counter. She did not take a counter fee. She said, in the careful Saunders County clerk's voice she had been using on Friday afternoons since 1986, "Prescott, tell your nephew Reed I am very glad he is helping you with this. Tell him his great-uncle Hollis would want him to do it carefully." I said, "Esmeralda, I will tell him." She said, "Prescott, I have one more thing. Hold on a moment." She walked back behind the counter. She walked into the small file room at the back. She came back to the counter with a 40th second jar of Hollis Milburn honey, a small mason jar with the date 2018, and a hand-lettered label that said in my brother's handwriting, Hollis Milburn, East Pasture, Summer, 2018. She set the jar on the counter between us. She said, "Prescott, Hollis brought this in to me on his last Friday afternoon visit. He had already been on Plainsview management for 90 days. He told me at the counter that he did not know how many more honey jars he would be making. I kept it on the shelf for 6 years. I would like you to have it back." I took the jar. I did not say anything for a long minute. I said, "Esmeralda, thank you." She said, "Prescott, go get them." I drove home to the ranch with the certified copies on the seat beside me. I called Marisol Castañeda at the Nebraska Attorney General's Office of Consumer Protection at 1:14 p.m. Marisol had been my counterpart at the AG's office for 14 years, before she had been appointed Senior Consumer Protection Counsel in 2021. We had worked 23 HOA and Special District Forensic referrals together during my last decade at State Auditor. She knew my voice. She knew my files. She knew what I sounded like when I had something serious. Marisol Castañeda was 54 years old. She had grown up in Scottsbluff, Nebraska. She had graduated from Creighton Law in 1996. She had joined the Nebraska AG's office in 1998 and had stayed there for 26 years. She had been my counterpart at the AG's office on the 23 forensic referrals I had brought from State Auditor between 2007 and 2021. She had personally won 20 of those 23 at trial or plea. She had read more forged notary stamps in her career than any prosecutor west of the Missouri River. She listened for 11 minutes without speaking. Then she said, "Prescott, I'm going to need you to come down to Lincoln tomorrow morning. I'm going to have Special Agent Quentin Lassiter from the FBI Omaha field office in my office at 9 a.m. I'm going to have the Nebraska State Patrol Major Crimes Division at 10. I'm going to have the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Nebraska on the phone at 11. We are going to build this case in one day." I said, "Marisol, I'll be in your office at 8:45. I was in her office at 8:42. We built the case across the next 8 months. The case was the largest single agricultural deed fraud case in the recorded history of the Nebraska Attorney General's office. By the time it was filed in Saunders County District Court on October 14, 2024, the case file included certified copies of all 5 forged deeds, the revoked notary commission record, my brother Hollis's authenticated signature card from 2007, 11 expert handwriting reports from a Nebraska State Patrol forensic document examiner, confirming the deed signatures were not Hollis Milburn's, Hollis's medical records from 2017 onward, confirming his progressive Lewy body dementia diagnosis, and his lack of testamentary capacity from at least 2018. The full bank record forensic accounting, confirming that all proceeds had been wired to Whispering Creek Holdings, LLC. The Whispering Creek Holdings, LLC bank records, showing the systematic transfer of $12,400,000 to the Whispering Creek Estates HOA Reserve Fund across 2019 to 2024. The HOA's construction contracts for the golf course, the marina, the equestrian center, the airstrip, and the clubhouse expansion, and a fully traced asset map showing exactly how every dollar of fraudulent farmland proceeds had been converted into specific HOA amenity improvements. The asset map was Reed's work. He had spent 6 months on it, weekends and evenings, between his day job CPA practice in Lincoln and the third weekend visits at the ranch. He had built it on a portable scanner he had bought at the Lincoln Office Depot in March for $140, and on a public record subscription to the Saunders County GIS database he had paid for himself out of the inheritance funds he had received from Hollis. He had pulled the construction permit records on the golf course, the marina, the equestrian center, the airstrip, and the clubhouse. Every project's contractors, every project's invoices, every project's payment dates, out of the Saunders County Building Department's online records, and out of the Whispering Creek Estate's HOA quarterly financial reports filed with the Nebraska Secretary of State. He had matched each construction payment to a specific deposit window on the Whispering Creek Holdings LLC bank records. He had built, in matched chronological columns, a single page that put every fraudulent land sale dollar adjacent to every amenity construction dollar. The page was Exhibit C, page 1. The remaining 57 pages of Exhibit C were the supporting documentation. He had cross-referenced every check, every wire, every contractor invoice, every construction permit. He had produced a 58-page exhibit that traced each of the $12,400,000 of fraudulent proceeds to a specific physical improvement on the Whispering Creek Estate's amenity grounds. The exhibit was, in the language Marisol used when she filed it as Exhibit C with the Saunders County District Court complaint on October 14th, the most thorough forensic asset trace document I have seen in 26 years of consumer protection practice. The court complaint sought 4 primary remedies: declaratory judgment that the 5 forged deeds were void ab initio under Nebraska law, quiet title in the Milburn family to the full 2,200 acres, a constructive trust over all proceeds derived from the fraudulent deeds and all assets acquired with such proceeds, and emergency injunctive relief to prevent any further dissipation of HOA assets pending trial. The complaint named as defendants Lacey Hargrove Day individually, Beauregard Hargrove individually, Whispering Creek Holdings LLC, the Whispering Creek Estates Homeowners Association as a separate party, and the Hargrove family's original developer entity, Hargrove Coastal Properties, LLC. Marisol referred parallel federal charges to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Omaha the same morning, which Special Agent Lassiter's team had been quietly building since February. The federal complaint was unsealed on Friday, October 25th, at 4:14 p.m., 23 hours and 34 minutes before the constructive trust order was signed. I had been to Whispering Creek Estates exactly twice in my life before October 26, 2024. Once in 2008, when Cassius Hargrove had invited Hollis and me to the original groundbreaking, and once in 2019, when I had attended a Lincoln Bar Association continuing education event held at the new clubhouse, without realizing the building was sitting on $3.5 million of my family's wind farm proceeds. Hollis had been at the 2008 groundbreaking too. He had stood beside me on the gravel construction site approach and had asked me, in the same Sunday afternoon voice he had used to teach me to read a soil conservation aerial photograph in 1979, whether I thought the planned community was going to be a good neighbor. I had told him I did not know yet. He had nodded. He had said, "Prescott, the neighbors are who you find out about across 30 years. He had been right by 30 months. On Saturday morning, October 26, 2024, the Whispering Creek Estates HOA hosted its annual member golf tournament at the 18-hole golf course on the southern half of the amenity grounds. The tournament was a full-field event, 144 members in foursomes across the course beginning at 7:14 a.m. with shotgun start. The HOA had hired a Whitset catering crew out of Omaha for the post-tournament awards luncheon, scheduled for 4 p.m. on the South Clubhouse veranda. The trophy for the year's tournament champion was a custom-engraved Waterford crystal bowl Lacey Hargrove Day had personally selected, and that her husband Beauregard, who had been the tournament's defending champion in 2023, was, by the leaderboard posted at the turn at 11:14 a.m., on track to win again. Judge Hartley Vandermeer of the Saunders County District Court had been the judge assigned to the Milburn case in October. She was 58 years old, a 1991 graduate of the University of Nebraska Law School, on the Saunders County bench since 2009. She had personally heard 14 of the 41 auditor referrals my office had filed during her time on the bench. She had ruled in favor of the state auditor in 12 of those 14. She had read the Milburn complaint and the Reed-Milburn forensic asset trace exhibit between Tuesday morning and Friday afternoon, and she had set the emergency injunction hearing for Saturday morning, October 26th at 9 a.m., a deliberate scheduling choice she had made on Friday at noon, when Marisol had informed her of the timing of the Whispering Creek Estates annual member tournament. I drove to Wahoo at 7:14 a.m. on Saturday morning, October 26th, 2024, with Reed in the passenger seat and the small mason jar of 2018 Hollis Milburn honey on the dashboard between us. Reed had stayed at the ranch overnight. He was wearing the gray suit he had been wearing to client meetings at the Lincoln accounting firm for 9 years. He had his 58-page asset trace exhibit in a binder on his lap. He had spent the previous evening on the porch with me and a thermos of coffee, going through every slide one more time. He had not said much. He had not needed to. The Saunders County Courthouse in Wahoo is a 3-story limestone building completed in 1904 on the public square in the center of town. The district courtroom is on the 2nd floor, at the end of a long, oak-paneled hallway my father had walked me down in 1968 when I was 10 years old, and he had taken me to watch a county zoning hearing because he had wanted me to see, in his words at the time, what people who are paying attention can do about things that are wrong. I had remembered the hallway every Saturday morning of my career. Reed and I walked down the hallway at 8:48 a.m. Marisol was waiting outside the courtroom door with Special Agent Lassiter and 2 Nebraska State Patrol investigators in dress greens. The forensic document examiner, a woman named Constanza Pellegrino from the Lincoln State Patrol Lab, was at the witness table inside the courtroom, organizing the 11 handwriting exhibits she had prepared over 6 months. The Lewy body neurologist, Dr. Aubrey Wickstrom, was on a Zoom screen at the witness stand. The Hargrove defense team, 3 attorneys in suits from a Lincoln firm called Stillman, Caswell, Holcomb, was at the respondents' table arranging binders. Lacey Hargrove Day was not at the table. Lacey had been informed by her counsel on Friday afternoon that the Saturday hearing was a civil emergency injunction matter and that her personal attendance was not required. She had elected, as the Friday night defense memo to her file indicated, to attend the annual member golf tournament instead. The defense team had not, by that Friday night memo, expected the constructive trust order to issue. The defense team had expected, in their own internal language, a possible TRO, with prompt opportunity for revision at a Monday hearing. The defense team would, by 3:14 p.m. that Saturday afternoon, no longer be representing Lacey Hargrove Day. The hearing ran for 5 hours and 11 minutes. Marisol presented. Reed presented the asset trace. The Nebraska State Patrol forensic document examiner presented. The Lewy body dementia neurologist, who had treated Hollis at the Wahoo Memory Care Clinic since 2019, presented by video deposition. I presented the family history of the parcel. The Hargrove defense team, a Lincoln firm Lacey had retained on Monday morning at considerable retainer cost, argued for 48 minutes that the constructive trust remedy was disproportionate, premature, and contrary to the equitable interests of the 116 HOA member households who would, in the defense team's framing, lose access to their amenity facilities. The lead defense attorney, a man named Vance Holcomb, who had practiced commercial litigation in Lincoln for 19 years, made the argument competently, but without the kind of preparation a Saturday morning emergency injunction hearing required. He had been retained on Monday, with the case file delivered to him on Tuesday. He had read the asset trace exhibit on Wednesday evening. He had drafted his Saturday argument on a yellow legal pad on Thursday and Friday between 2 other client matters. He had not, by his own concession in his closing on Saturday morning, had a full opportunity to review the totality of the proposed Reed-Milburn exhibit, which on its face appears extraordinarily comprehensive. Reed had spent 6 months on the exhibit. Vance Holcomb had spent 2 evenings. The asymmetry was the case. Judge Vandermeer listened to the defense argument without interrupting. At 2:48 p.m., she retired to chambers. At 3:11, she returned to the bench. At 3:14, she signed the order. The order awarded constructive trust over the entire Whispering Creek Estates amenity asset base to me, effective immediately, with provisions that the HOA member households retain the right to negotiate continued amenity access through subsequent settlement proceedings to be supervised by the court. The order was served on Lacey Hargrove Day at the South Clubhouse veranda at 3:48 p.m. by the Nebraska State Patrol Sergeant and the U.S. Marshal who had driven up from Omaha specifically for the service. They walked across the white pea gravel of the South Clubhouse approach in dress greens and federal blacks. The lunch and catering crew, who had been setting tables for the tournament awards, stopped setting tables. The tournament players, who were on the 18th green for the final putts of the day, stopped putting. Beauregard Hargrove, who had just sunk a birdie putt to take the year's tournament with a score of 67, looked up from the cup at the State Patrol Sergeant and the U.S. Marshal walking across his amenity lawn toward his wife at the South Clubhouse veranda. He set the putter down on the green. He did not pick it up again. Lacey Hargrove Day was Mirandized at 3:51 p.m. on the South Clubhouse veranda in front of 140 HOA member households, the Whitsett catering crew, the Whispering Creek Estates golf course superintendent and his crew, and me. I had been standing at the back of the South Clubhouse since 3:42 p.m. with Marisol Castaneda, Reed Milburn, Special Agent Lassiter, and Judge Vandermeer's bailiff, who had hand-carried the certified order copy from Wahoo. Beauregard Hargrove was Mirandized 2 minutes later by the U.S. Marshal in the cart barn entry. Their daughter, Beauregard and Lacey's 28-year-old daughter Skyla, who had been on the tournament's social media committee and had been live-streaming the awards luncheon setup on the Whispering Creek Estates Instagram account, set her phone down on the catering table and put both hands on her temples. The Instagram stream cut at 3:54 p.m. I walked from the back of the South Clubhouse to the front of the South Clubhouse veranda. The HOA members parted to let me through. Marisol walked beside me. Reed walked behind us. Judge Vandermeer's bailiff carried the certified order in a leather portfolio. I stepped up onto the veranda. I turned to face the members. I did not raise my voice. My wife Adrienne had taught me in 1985 that the best chaplaincy voice and the best auditor's voice are the same voice. Quiet, careful, addressing the truth of a story other people have been refusing to tell. I said, "Good afternoon. I'm Prescott Milburn. The 2,200 acres west of your subdivision belonged to my family from 1872 until 5 forged deeds were recorded against it between 2019 and 2024. The proceeds of those forged deeds, $12,400,000, built the golf course you played today, the marina you boat at, the equestrian center your children ride at, the airstrip a few of you fly out of, and the clubhouse expansion you are standing on. The Saunders County District Court has, by order signed at 3:14 this afternoon, awarded constructive trust of all of those amenity assets to me, effective immediately. I want you to know 3 things. The first is that you, as Whispering Creek Estates member households, are not personally liable for the fraud committed by your former HOA president and her husband. The second is that I am not closing your amenities. I am opening them. The golf course will be open to the public starting Monday morning at the public rate fee structure I will publish on Sunday. The marina will be open to the public on the same schedule. The equestrian center will be donated to the Saunders County 4-H youth program, with reserved access for the existing Whispering Creek member boarders. The airstrip will be donated to the Nebraska Department of Aeronautics for use as a public access general aviation facility. The clubhouse will be retained as a community event center available to your HOA at no charge for any member event the HOA chooses to schedule in perpetuity. The third is that I am very sorry it took this long for somebody to notice what was being done to my brother Hollis's land. He died believing the farm was still his. I'd like to thank the Saunders County Register of Deeds, the Nebraska Attorney General's Office, the FBI Omaha Field Office, the Nebraska State Patrol, Judge Vandermeer, and my son Reed for the 8 months of work that brought us here. Have a good evening. I stepped down off the veranda. The Whitsit catering crew, after a long 30 seconds, resumed setting tables for an awards luncheon that no longer had defendants in it. The HOA members, most of whom had been on the property since 2009, none of whom had known what had been quietly happening since 2019, began, in scattered conversations across the lawn, the work of being a community whose officers had defrauded them. Lacey Hargrove Day pleaded out in March of 2025 to 9 state felony counts, including forgery in the first degree, theft by deception, money laundering, and abuse of a vulnerable adult. She drew 38 months in Nebraska State Correctional, with the last 16 suspended on conditions, including full personal restitution of $1,800,000, her personal traceable share of the proceeds, and a permanent ban from any HOA officer position in Nebraska for life. Beauregard Hargrove pleaded out in May to federal wire fraud and conspiracy. He drew 30 months in federal custody and forfeiture of his personal retirement accounts to restitution. Cassius Hargrove, the original developer who had been quietly aware of the scheme since 2020 by Reed's forensic trace, pleaded out in July to misprision of felony and drew 11 months in federal custody. Skyla Hargrove Day, Beauregard and Lacey's 28-year-old daughter, who had set her phone down on the catering table at 3:54 p.m. and put both hands on her temples, walked out of the South Clubhouse veranda at 4:18 p.m. that Saturday afternoon, and drove back to her own house in Bellevue without speaking to anybody. She would, by Tuesday morning, retain a separate attorney from her mother and her father. She would, by Thursday afternoon, voluntarily approach Special Agent Lassiter's office with a USB drive of her mother's personal email backups that she had had access to since 2021 from a shared family iCloud account. The USB drive would, by November of 2024, provide approximately 140 additional federal documents to the U.S. Attorney's case file. Skyla would not be charged with any crime. She would also, by the divorce decree her parents would file in 2025, not be named as an inheritor of any Hargrove family asset. The reformed Whispering Creek Estates Homeowners Association held its first emergency board meeting at 4 p.m. on Monday, October 28th. 2 days after the Saturday afternoon arrests, with a slate of 7 interim board members selected by a quickly convened member caucus from the households that had been least involved in Lacey's 6-year amenity expansion. The interim president was the retired Wahoo veterinarian Brian E. Halverson. The interim treasurer was a retired Bellevue University accounting professor named Reverend Theron McCready. The interim secretary was Mira Halverson, no relation to Bryony, a retired Omaha elementary school principal who had moved into Whispering Creek in 2014. The interim board's first action on Monday afternoon was to issue a written public apology to me, my late brother Hollis, my sons Caleb and Reed, and the entire Saunders County agricultural community. The apology was published in the Cedar Bluff Standard, the Wahoo newspaper, and the Omaha World Herald on Tuesday, October 29th. The apology was 3 columns wide on the second page of each paper. The apology was, by the standards of HOA public apologies, extraordinary. The board's second action was to authorize Brian E. Halverson to negotiate a long-term amenity access agreement with me on behalf of the residents. Bryony came to the ranch on Tuesday afternoon with a foil-covered pan of her grandmother Olga's caramel rolls and a printed 3-page proposal in a manila folder. She had been the Whispering Creek Estates HOA's quietest critic since 2019. She had voted against every one of Lacey's amenity expansion votes, alone, every time. She had been called a curmudgeon by her own neighbors for 5 years. We sat on the porch for 2 hours. I accepted the access agreement on the spot. I converted the Whispering Creek Estates amenity assets into the Hollis Milburn Community Trust on March 14, 2025. The trust opened the golf course to the public on the same schedule I had announced on the veranda. The marina opened the same week. The equestrian center was deeded to the Saunders County 4-H Foundation in May. The airstrip was deeded to the Nebraska Department of Aeronautics in June. The clubhouse remained as a community event center, available to the reformed HOA at no charge, and available to any nonprofit Saunders County organization, on a first-come, first-served booking basis at cost. The quiet title order on the 2,200 acres was filed by Marisol Castaneda on October 30th, 2024, 4 days after the constructive trust order. Judge Vandermeer set the hearing for November 14th to allow the third-party good-faith purchasers, NextEra, Williams, Cargill, EDP, and 4 smaller utility purchasers, to appear and brief the court on their respective interests. Each of them appeared. Each of them stipulated to the void ab initio status of the forged deeds. Each of them entered into the court-supervised settlement framework Marisol had drafted in coordination with Reed across the first 2 weeks of November. Each of them was paid out of the constructive trust asset base by January of 2025. Each of them re-entered into fair market replacement contracts with me across the spring of 2025. I returned the 2,200 acres of farmland to full Milburn family ownership by quiet title order issued by Judge Vandermeer on November 14, 2024. I voided the NextEra wind lease, the Williams Company's pipeline easement, the Cargill ethanol contract, and the EDP Renewables solar lease in subsequent litigation. NextEra and Williams and Cargill and EDP, all of whom had been good-faith third-party purchasers without knowledge of the fraud, were paid out from the constructive trust asset base under the court's settlement framework. I then renegotiated fair market replacement contracts with each of them across the spring of 2025 on terms that put the actual lease and easement income, approximately $1,100,000 annually, into Milburn family hands rather than Whispering Creek Holdings LLC accounts. The farm is being operated as a working row crop and cattle operation again under Plainsview Agronomy's renewed management. Caleb drove over from Pottawatomie County in March to walk the western property line with me. We walked it for 4 hours. We started at the southwest fence corner Hollis had set with cedar posts in 1986. We walked north along the wind turbine row, then east along the section line, then north again across the pipeline corridor scar, where Williams had laid the 8-inch line in 2020 without Hollis ever signing the easement. Caleb did not say much. He had grown up walking this boundary every summer between the ages of 7 and 18. He had not walked it in 14 years. He stopped at the third cottonwood north of the southwest corner and put his hand on the bark and stood there for a long minute. He said, "Dad, Uncle Hollis taught me to climb this one in 2003. He told me not to fall." I said, "Caleb, you didn't fall." He said, "Dad, he didn't either." We walked the rest of the line. The wind turbines were still turning. The pipeline corridor was still buried. The bottomland was still the bottomland Asa Milburn had homesteaded in 1872. The first Hollis Milburn Community Day at the converted golf course was held on a Saturday in May of 2025. 241 Saunders County residents came. The golf course was free for the day. Reed set up the registration table. Caleb drove over from Pottawatomie with his 3 boys and ran the junior clinic on the practice green. Bryony Halverson baked 4 pans of her grandmother Olga's caramel rolls and gave them out at the clubhouse lobby. Esmeralda Trotter drove down from Wahoo and brought in her own canvas tote bag the small mason jar of 2018 Hollis Milburn honey she had given me back on the morning of February 22nd, 2024. Only this time, she had refilled it with fresh 2025 honey her own great-nephew kept in a hive on the back of her property line. She handed me the refilled jar at the clubhouse lobby at 11:14 a.m. She did not say anything. She did not need to. I sit on the porch of Hollis's ranch house most evenings with a thermos of coffee. The 2018 honey jar is on the kitchen shelf, where it has been since February 22nd of 2024. I have not opened it. I will not open it. The 116 Whispering Creek Estates households are, by the most recent informal newsletter I received from their reformed HOA, comfortable with the community trust arrangement. The HOA has a new president, a retired Wahoo veterinarian named Bryony Halverson, who drives down to my porch most third Sundays of the month with her husband Olaf and a pan of her grandmother's caramel rolls. The caramel rolls are excellent. If you have ever discovered, after inheriting a piece of family land, that your HOA had been quietly selling pieces of it under your nose, comment below with your state and what they took. Read every one. Subscribe. Next week, a Florida widower, a 1972 Cadillac, and the HOA president who picked the wrong car. She picked the wrong Cadillac.
What lazy half-broke they do not understand, and what most petty tyrants never understand, is that the man on the other side of her HOA fence lines was not a quiet, retired civil servant she could defrost across a 6-year period in the slow decline of his older brother. He was a 32-year veteran of the Nebraska State Auditor Office, who has personally led 147 HOA forensic audits and had referred 41 of them for criminal prosecution. She thought a false deed was a piece of paper. He thought a false deed was a felony and a contracted trust predicate. The contracted trust wins because a contracted trust does not get angry and does not need to lift its voice. If you have inherited land from an elderly relative whose mental capacity may have declined in their final years, the first thing you should do tonight is prove every recorded deed against that land from the date of the relative's diagnosis forward. Compare every notary commission against your state's Secretary of State database. Trace every dollar of any sale process to where it's actually landed. The forgeries find themselves. They always do. If this story hit home, drop your own HOA nightmare in the comments, your state, and what they took. Subscribe. Next week, a Florida widower, a 1972 Cadillac, and the HOA president who picked the wrong car. See you on the next one.